Kyoto, Japan, October 8, 1594. The air is thick, a noxious blend of scorched timber and something far more sickening. The crowd, a silent shoulder-to-shoulder mass of merchants, peasants, samurai, and servants, leans in, their faces masks of horror and morbid fascination. At the epicenter of this dark spectacle sits a monstrous, black iron cauldron, its mouth yawning upward, releasing a ghostly shroud of steam into the crisp autumn sky. Beneath it, the oil sings. It's a low, persistent simmer that doesn't just crawl under the skin. It seems to vibrate within the very bones of the witnesses. The executioner's assistants methodically feed the hungry fire. With every fresh log, the flames leap higher, throwing erratic, flickering shadows across the two figures who kneel before the death trap. Bound and guarded, they are a study in doomed humanity. The man, broad-shouldered despite the crude ropes, his dark hair matted with sweat and dirt. Beside him, a child, barely 7 years old, a small vessel of pure, radiant terror. His trembling is not from the cold, but from a profound fear that radiates outward like the heat of the oil. The man is Ishikawa Goemon. The child is his son. In mere moments, they will both be submerged into that liquid death. You are here too, and you are about to witness an image that will forever burn its way into your memory. A father's ultimate love twisted into both a final, horrific salvation and a terrible damnation. An act of defiance that will ripple across centuries. But to truly comprehend this moment, you must first understand the life that led to this gruesome end. We must step back, deep into the shadows of a Japan fractured by endless war, a world where the tightrope walk between honor and survival demanded a sharp blade and a cold heart, a forge where legends were born, only to be consumed by the very flames of their making. Before we plunge into these forgotten stories of suffering and survival, if this kind of hidden history grips you, please do consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more journeys into the past. And comment below to let me know where you're watching from. It's astounding that we can connect across time and space, from different corners of the world, united by this shared curiosity. The crucible of war. The year is 1558. Japan is a bleeding wound. The Sengoku period, the age of warring states, has utterly atomized the country into a vicious, sprawling battlefield. Warlords fight a ceaseless, brutal war for land, for power, and for the elusive, almost mythological dream of unification. It is into this maelstrom of chaos that the child who would become Goemon is born. A child destined to grow into either the most infamous thief in Japanese history or the people's most beloved folk hero, depending on the storyteller. They whispered his original name was Sonada Kuranoshin, a name that belonged to a respected samurai family serving the Miyoshi clan in Iga province. His destiny was supposed to be one of duty and honor, a life spent serving his lord and dying with his ancestral sword in his hand. But fate, as it always does in these tales, held a darker plan. Picture a boy, no older than 15, standing over the cooling bodies of his parents. Their blood is a dark, spreading stain on the polished wooden floors of what was, moments before, his home. The shogun's forces, the Ashikaga shogunate, had come in the deepest part of the night. They were swift and utterly merciless. His father, Ishikawa Akashi, had been condemned to death for a crime as simple as being on the losing side of a political fault line that shifted as unpredictably as sand in a windstorm. The boy's hands are shaking as they clamp down on the hilt of his father's sword, the steel still radiating the warmth of the blood it had shed. But the killers are gone. They have evaporated back into the blackness from which they emerged, leaving behind only the corpses and the acrid stench of sudden, devastating violence. This is the very moment Sonada Kuranoshin dies. In his place, something else is forged, something harder, angrier, and infinitely more dangerous. The Shadow's training. He is reborn as a student of Momochi Sandayu. This man was one of the most dreaded ninja masters of the Iga school. Here, in the fierce mountain strongholds, where the shadows themselves are weapons and silence is the only armor, the boy learns the deadly arts that will make him a ghost. He mastered the esoteric way of the blade, the secrets of deep infiltration, and the fatal, soundless dance of assassination that transforms ordinary men into mere whispers in the night. But even in this austere world of iron discipline and casual death, the boy's heart betrayed him. The story goes that he fell into a desperate love affair with one of his master's concubines. History has forgotten her name, but her beauty, they say, must have been a prize worth dying for. When Momochi inevitably discovered the infidelity, There could be only two outcomes, immediate death or exile. The boy chose exile, but he did not leave empty-handed. He stole something irreplaceable from his master, a sword of legendary, peerless craftsmanship, a blade that, it was said, seemed to sing with its own vibrant inner light. This theft was a crime that would forever brand him a nukenin, a runaway ninja, a man utterly stripped of honor or a home. And so, Sonada Kuranoshin vanishes into the impenetrable mists of history. From those very mists emerges Ishikawa Goemon, a name that in time would become an electric symbol for both terror and for hope. It depended entirely on whether you counted yourself among the impoverished or the powerful. The noble thief. The Kansai region in the late 16th century was a place of grotesque economic imbalance. Wealth was a raging river flowing freely to those who controlled its channels, while the peasants were forced to survive on whatever desperate trickles were left. The merchant class grew fat on a burgeoning trade. The samurai lords hoarded ancient treasures like avaricious dragons guarding their gold. Even the great Buddhist temples became vast repositories of riches that would have made even emperors weep with envy. Into this world of vast, aching inequality steps Ishikawa Goemon, and he brings with him a profound, dangerous, and very different definition of justice. Imagine the moment, a night in 1580, completely absent of the moon. The vast mansion of a wealthy Osaka merchant lies perfectly silent under the stars. The guards walk their patrols with the indolent confidence of men who have never known genuine danger. Inside, the merchant sleeps, cushioned by silk and surrounded by the gleam of gold. His dreams are undoubtedly filled with expanding trade routes and impressive profit margins. He never hears the feather-soft footsteps on his roof. He never sees the shadow detach itself from the night and flow through his window, like liquid ink. He only jolts awake when he feels the precise, cold steel of a blade pressed against his throat. He looks up into a pair of eyes that seem to contain all the suppressed fury of the dispossessed. "Your money or your life," Goemon whispers. But the voice carries an authority deeper than simple robbery. "This is not merely theft," he says. "It is redistribution. The gold you earned from the sweat of farmers and the broken backs of craftsmen will now return to those who need it most." By the next dawn, the merchant's strongboxes are completely empty. But in the scattered villages just outside Osaka, inexplicable gifts begin to appear. A heavy bag of rice is found on a widow's doorstep. Silver coins are pressed anonymously into the calloused hands of a crippled beggar. Medicine for a feverish child is paid for with gold, still bearing the distinctive seal of the disgraced merchant. This is how legends are truly forged. Not in the grand, echoing halls of power, but in the quiet, transformative moments of kindness that always follow the most audacious acts of defiance. Goemon and his inner circle become ghosts in the night. They strike only at the immensely wealthy and the most powerful. They seize their accumulated wealth and inject it back into the broken ecosystem of the poor. The common people begin to speak his name in hushed tones, almost with reverence. Here, finally, was a man who understood their quiet struggles. Someone utterly willing to risk everything to rewrite the balance of a world that had become impossibly tilted toward the powerful. Children grew up on the thrilling stories of the noble thief, the one who stole from the opulent to give to the destitute. In their collective imagination, Goemon became something more than human. He was a force of nature, a tireless champion of a pure justice. The two titans. But legends, as Goemon was about to learn with the most terrible finality, are incredibly dangerous things. They attract the keen attention of those who prefer their systemic injustices to remain utterly undisturbed. While Goemon was patiently building his powerful reputation in the shadows, another man was rising to prominence in the full, unforgiving glare of the day. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, born to a peasant family, he had ruthlessly clawed his way up from the absolute lowest rungs of society to become arguably the most powerful man in all of Japan. Where Goemon employed cunning and stealth, Hideyoshi commanded vast armies and subtle diplomacy. Where Goemon sought to radically redistribute wealth, Hideyoshi was driven by the single-minded desire to accumulate it. The two men were almost mirror images, both born to nothing, both risen to dizzying prominence through sheer, unrelenting force of will, both commanding the fierce loyalty of those who chose to serve them. But their paths diverged in a way that would ultimately prove fatal to one of them. Hideyoshi was the great unifier, the man destined to finally terminate the savage Sengoku period and forge a new, rigid order. After the death of his master, Oda Nobunaga, in 1582, Hideyoshi had systematically, brilliantly, conquered or negotiated the submission of every warring daimyo. By the 1590s, he stood alone at the absolute pinnacle of power. He ruled over a Japan that was experiencing peace, a fragile, enforced quiet, for the first time in generations. But Hideyoshi was also a realist. He understood that peace required far more than just military victory. It demanded the total elimination of all sources of disorder, all challenges to his authority. And in the deep, unyielding shadows of his new order, Ishikawa Goemon represented everything he desperately sought to destroy. He was lawlessness. He was rebellion. He was the dangerously romantic notion that an individual conscience could ever triumph over the vast, cold machinery of state power, the spark of vengeance. The inevitable, final confrontation did not arrive through any grand strategic design. It was sparked by a deeply personal tragedy, the kind that instantly transforms political enemies into bitter-blood enemies. Goemon's wife, Otaki, a woman whose beauty was famed to rival that of the most exquisite court ladies, was taken by Hideyoshi's ruthless agents. Some chroniclers claim she was executed for her husband's high crimes. Others claim she died attempting to shield their young son from capture. What matters now is not the exact bloody details of her death. It is the sheer, unquenchable rage it ignited in Goemon's heart. The man who had been content to discreetly steal from the corrupt wealthy and redistribute their gold now thirsted for a single, fundamental thing: revenge. Fushimi Castle, Kyoto, September 1594. The castle dominates the hill, sitting like an imperial jewel. Its white, formidable walls gleam starkly in the moonlight. Inside, Toyotomi Hideyoshi sleeps the deep, protected sleep of the truly powerful. He is surrounded by layers of suffocating security that would render any infiltration utterly impossible to anyone but a true master of the shadow arts. But Goemon had spent decades perfecting the art of the impossible. He moves through the castle's maze like a ghost, his lethal training under Momochi Sandayu now serving him with perfect, lethal efficiency. Past the drowsy outer guards, through the labyrinth of corridors, up the silent stairs that lead directly to the private chambers of the man who single-handedly rules Japan. The bronze bell. The room is surprisingly Spartan for the chamber of such an immensely powerful man. Hideyoshi lies on his futon, his breathing deep and perfectly regular. For a single long moment, Goemon simply watches him. This peasant turned king, this architect who had forged a unified Japan under his singular will. In the deep sleep, he seems almost harmless, a small man with tired features and silvering hair. Nothing in his repose suggests the cold, iron will that has ruthlessly reshaped an entire nation. Goemon slowly draws his blade. The stolen sword, his silent companion for so many years. The steel instantly catches the pale moonlight and seems to glow with its own internal murderous fire. One quick, decisive thrust and the tyrant will be dead. Japan will be free of his suffocating oppression. Otaki will be avenged. But as he raises the weapon for the fatal strike, his foot catches the hidden edge of a small table. A small bronze bell, placed there for decoration or ceremony, tumbles to the polished floor. It strikes the wood with a sound that is like thunder in the vast silence of the night. The effect is immediate, catastrophic, and total. Guards pour into the room from hidden alcoves, their swords already drawn and gleaming. Hideyoshi bolts upright. His eyes are wide with shock, but already they are calculating the odds. In seconds, Goemon finds himself completely surrounded. His blade is pressed to the throat of a man he can no longer possibly kill. "So," Hideyoshi says. His voice is remarkably calm for a man who has just been woken by an assassin. The great Ishikawa Goemon finally shows his face. "I had wondered when you would come for me." Goemon is silent. There is nothing left to say. He has failed, and failure, he knows with chilling certainty, means not just death. It means something far, far worse, something that would make death seem like a mercy. The unbroken code. The trial, if such a farce can even be called one, is swift and its outcome is predetermined. Goemon stands before the triumphant Hideyoshi in the great, echoing hall of Fushimi Castle. His hands are bound, but his head is held high. All around them, the court officials and military commanders watch with the hungry, fixed attention of men who know they are witnessing a moment in history. Hideyoshi, seated upon his throne, studies the man who tried to kill him with something that might almost be grudging admiration. Here, after all, was a worthy enemy. A man who came terrifyingly close to succeeding, where so many others had utterly failed. "Ishikawa Goemon," Hideyoshi's voice booms, carrying effortlessly to every remote corner of the vast hall. "You stand accused of theft, of banditry, and of the attempted assassination of the rightful ruler of Japan. How do you answer these most serious charges? Goemon's response is recounted as a magnificent moment of pure defiance. He stares directly into Hideyoshi's eyes. He speaks not as a cornered criminal pleading for leniency, but as a man who has lived and is prepared to die by his own absolute code. "I am guilty of all you have named," he declares, his voice strong, clear, and utterly unafraid. "I have stolen from the wealthy to give to the desperately poor. I have defied the unjust laws of those who seek to grind the weak beneath their heels. And yes, I have tried to kill you, because you are a tyrant who has forgotten that power exists only to serve the people, not to dominate them." The court erupts in a shocked murmur. No one speaks to Hideyoshi in this manner. No one challenges his absolute authority so directly. But Goemon is not finished. "If these are crimes, then I am proud to be a criminal," he announces. "If defying injustice is treason, then I am happy to be a traitor. Do what you will with me, but know that others will follow in my footsteps. The poor will always be in need of champions, and tyrants will forever breed rebellion." The sentence. Hideyoshi's face remains perfectly impassive throughout this ringing speech. But those who knew him well could see the raw, terrifying fury coiling behind his unblinking eyes. This was not just mere defiance. It was a direct existential challenge to everything he had painstakingly built, everything he represented. "You speak of justice," Hideyoshi replies, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet pitch. "But true justice requires order, and order requires that those who break the law face the consequences. You have lived by violence, Ishikawa Goemon. Now you will die by it." The sentence, when it finally comes, is so shocking that even the most hardened courtiers gasp out loud. Death by boiling, a punishment so rare, so terrible, that it is reserved only for the most heinous, unthinkable crimes. But Hideyoshi has not finished his grim performance. "And since you claim to be a champion of the people," he continues, his voice like ice, "let us see how much you truly love them. Your son will share your fate. He will die as you die, slowly and in unimaginable agony, so that all who witness it will understand the true price of defying the rightful order." Now at last Goemon's iron composure cracks. His son, his completely innocent boy, the child who has done nothing but bear his father's cursed name, will die for his crimes. The absolute, profound pain that sweeps across Goemon's face is worse than any physical torture could ever be. "The boy is blameless," he chokes out, his voice finally breaking. "Kill me as you will, but spare the child. He has done nothing to deserve this terrible fate." But Hideyoshi is utterly implacable. "The child is your child. He carries your blood, your name, your legacy of defiance. Japan will be better off without both of you." The final promise. The night before the execution, Goemon sits huddled in his cell. His son is pressed tightly against his side. The boy, perhaps 7 years old, does not fully grasp the horrifying reality of what is coming. But he can sense his father's anguish, a physical, suffocating weight. "Papa," the child whispers into the darkness. "Are we going to die tomorrow?" Goemon looks down at this innocent child. The boy has been caught in the deadly game, between a desperate father and the Emperor of Japan. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that he must die for a rebellion he never joined, for sins he never committed? "Yes," Goemon says finally, "he has always believed in the truth, even when it is a horrifying truth. We are going to die tomorrow." The boy is quiet for a long, heavy moment. He processes this information with the strange, unearthly calm that children sometimes display when faced with an incomprehensible disaster. "Will it hurt?" he asks. Goemon closes his eyes, fighting back the tears. "Yes," he says again, "it will hurt. Will you be with me?" "Yes," Goemon promises, pulling his son closer still. "I will be with you. I will hold you, and I will not let go, no matter what happens." The boy nods, apparently satisfied with this profound final answer. In his young mind, death is perhaps not so terrifying if his father is there to face it with him. Goemon spends the remaining hours composing his death poem, a time-honored tradition that allows condemned men to leave behind a final statement of their philosophy or deepest beliefs. His poem, when the ink is dry, is both a somber confession and a fierce prophecy. Though you may boil a thief's body, you cannot boil away his spirit. Thieves will always exist, as long as there are rich and poor. It is a poem that speaks not just to his own imminent fate, but to the eternal, grinding struggle between the powerful and the powerless, the rulers and the ruled. In the shadow of death, Goemon sees himself as part of something massive, a force that no earthly punishment, no matter how terrible, can truly destroy. The final act. October 8, 1594, Nanzenji Temple, Kyoto. Dawn arrives too quickly, and yet not quickly enough. The execution ground is already choked with spectators, merchants and monks, peasants and samurai, all drawn by the terrible macabre fascination of witnessing an unprecedented act. Death by boiling was reserved for only the most monstrous crimes, and most here have never seen it performed. The great iron cauldron sits in the precise center of the cleared space. Its black surface gleams dully in the morning sun. Steam rises in thick plumes, and the sickening smell of superheated oil permeates the air. The fire has been stoked since before dawn. The oil inside is now at a temperature that would kill a man in a blinding flash. Goemon and his son are brought forward, bound in chains. The boy clings desperately to his father's side. His small hand is a vice grip on Goemon's robes. The crowd surges closer. Their collective voices are a low, horrified murmur of anticipation. Hideyoshi himself is present. He is seated on a high, raised platform, perfectly positioned to observe the agonizing proceedings. His face is a perfect blank, showing absolutely no emotion as he watches. The man who tried to kill him face his final moments. The executioner, a grim-faced man who has performed this hideous duty before, steps forward. He explains the procedure with the cold, clinical detachment of a seasoned professional. The condemned will be lowered into the boiling oil feet first. This is to allow them to experience the full, extended agony of their death. There will be no mercy, no quick end to their suffering. Goemon listens to these words without a single flinch. But his iron grip on his son's small hand tightens further. The boy looks up at him. His eyes are wide with terror, yet filled with a profound trust. Even now, at the end of everything, he believes his father will protect him. "Remember what I told you," Goemon whispers to his son. "I will not let go." The guards move to separate them, to attach the boy to his own chain that will lower him into the cauldron's depths. But as their hands reach for the child, Goemon performs the act that will be remembered for centuries. He lifts his son high above his head, holding him as far from the hellish, boiling oil as his straining strength will possibly allow. The chains that bind him make this an almost impossible feat of pure strength. But desperation gives him superhuman power. His muscles strain, his shoulders scream, but he holds the boy aloft. The crowd gasps. This is not how executions are supposed to happen. The condemned are meant to submit, to accept their fate with either terror or dignity, but never to resist. But Goemon is doing more than resisting. He is making a final, impossible statement. "If you must have our deaths," he roars, his voice carrying clearly across the silent crowd, "then take mine first. Let the boy die quickly without this suffering." The executioner turns, looking up to Hideyoshi for guidance. This is not in the script. But Hideyoshi's face remains cold stone. He simply nods for the execution to proceed. The banner of defiance. The chain lowers. Goemon's feet touch the surface of the oil. The effect is immediate and utterly horrific. His body arches in an unbearable agony as the boiling liquid burns through his skin. But still he holds his son high above his head. The boy screams a piercing sound, whether from terror or from the searing heat radiating. From below it's impossible to tell. Lower they go. The chain descends link by excruciating link. The oil reaches Goemon's knees, then his waist, then his chest. Each inch is an eternity of pure agony. But still his arms remain impossibly steady. Still he holds his son above the killing heat. The crowd watches in stunned, absolute silence. Some are weeping openly. Others have turned their faces away, unable to bear the sight. But every single person understands that they are witnessing something utterly unprecedented. A father's ferocious love made manifest in the most extreme, horrifying circumstances imaginable. As the oil reaches Goemon's neck, his strength finally, completely begins to fail. His arms tremble violently, and the boy begins to slip. But instead of letting his son fall slowly into the boiling cauldron, Goemon does one last final thing, an act that would haunt the witnesses forever. He plunges the child down into the oil with him, driving him deep beneath the surface in one swift, single, merciful motion. The boy's scream is instantly cut short as the boiling liquid closes over his head, killing him immediately. Then Goemon lifts his son's small body high above his head one final time. He holds it like a banner of defiance as his own life ebbs away, even as the oil destroys his flesh, even as death claims him. He maintains his fierce grip on the child he couldn't save, but could at least spare from prolonged, unbearable agony. The last image the crowd sees is Goemon's face, burned and dying but still utterly defiant. His eyes are fixed on Hideyoshi with an expression of such concentrated hatred that those who saw it would later claim they felt the temperature instantly drop. Then he sinks beneath the surface, taking his son with him. The terrible spectacle is finally over. The immortal legacy, the brutal execution of Ishikawa Goemon and his son, was intended to be a final, terrifying demonstration of the price of defying authority. Hideyoshi planned it as a definitive warning, a spectacle so unspeakably awful that it would crush any seeds of rebellion in the hearts of those who witnessed it. Instead, it instantly became something else entirely. The iconic image of a father sacrificing everything to protect his child, even in the very face of death, resonated with the common people in ways Hideyoshi had never, ever anticipated. Far from destroying Goemon's legacy, the execution immediately transformed him from a notorious bandit into a folk hero of absolutely mythic proportions. The story spread across Japan like a wildfire. It grew and warped in the constant telling. Goemon became not just a man, but an unbreakable symbol, the embodiment of resistance to ruthless tyranny, of fierce love for family, of the eternal struggle between the powerful and the powerless. His death poem, painstakingly smuggled out of his prison cell, became a kind of quiet anthem for the dispossessed. In the years that followed, countless other rebels and thieves would lay claim to his name. They carried on his profound legacy of stealing from the rich to give to the poor. The authorities would capture and execute these pretenders, but it simply did not matter. The idea of Goemon had become vastly more powerful than the man himself. The large iron bathtub eventually came to be called a Goemon Bureau in his honor, a darkly ironic tribute that transformed the instrument of his agonizing death into a symbol of cleansing and renewal. Every time someone took a steaming hot bath, they would inevitably remember the man who perished in boiling oil for the crime of loving justice more than his own life. Kabuki theaters would immortalize his legend in plays that drew massive crowds for centuries. Artists would paint him as a hero of impossible superhuman strength. Writers would craft epic novels about his adventures, each one more fantastical than the last. But perhaps the most enduring, unsettling legacy of Ishikawa Goemon is the profound question his life and death still pose. In a world where all power is concentrated in the hands of the few, where the rich grow inexorably richer while the poor struggle merely to survive, what is the proper moral response? Is it a silent submission to the established authority? Or is it rebellion in the uncompromising name of justice? Goemon chose rebellion, and it cost him absolutely everything. Yet in the total loss of his life, he gained something that Hideyoshi, for all his monumental power, could never possibly possess: immortality in the hearts and minds of the common people. The unanswered question. 4 centuries have now passed since Ishikawa Goemon and his son met their end in that boiling cauldron. But the fundamental questions their deaths raise remain just as relevant today as they were in 1594. Our world has changed beyond all recognition. We possess technologies that would seem like magic to the people of the Sengoku period. Governments that claim to perfectly represent the will of the people. Systems of law that solemnly promise justice for all. Yet the fundamental inequalities that drove Goemon to his final, desperate rebellion persist. The powerful still grow richer. The poor still struggle desperately to survive. Powerful people still escape the consequences for their actions, while the powerless suffer for crimes they didn't commit. The machinery of oppression has become more polished and sophisticated, but it has not disappeared, and so the legend of Goemon endures. Not as some dusty historical curiosity, but as a living, immediate challenge. He reminds us that there are times when the laws of the state stand in stark conflict with the unwritten laws of conscience. When the absolute demands of justice require us to risk everything we hold dear, he also reminds us of the terrible, crushing price such choices always exact. Goemon's rebellion cost him his life, his family, and any chance of ever seeing the world he fought so fiercely to create. His son died for his father's choices, an innocent, agonizing victim of a war he never chose to join. The image of that final, agonizing moment, a father holding his dying son high above his head, defying his executioners even as his own life slipped away, remains one of the most powerful symbols of both love and loss in all of human history. It shows us what we are capable of in our finest, most desperate moments, and what we are ultimately willing to sacrifice for the things we truly believe in. In the end, perhaps that is the true burning legacy of Ishikawa Goemon, not the robbery or the rebellion, but the stark reminder that there are things in this world absolutely worth dying for, and that the greatest human tragedies so often arise from the collision between love and justice, between the profound desire to protect those we care about and the unyielding need to fight for what is right. The man who was boiled alive with his son became something more than a historical figure. He became a mirror in which we can see our own souls, and a question that every generation must eventually answer for itself. When faced with crushing injustice, will we submit or will we resist? And if we choose resistance, are we truly prepared to pay the price? The iron cauldron has long since cooled and rusted, but the fire that drove Ishikawa Goemon to his death burns on. It waits for the next person, brave enough or foolish enough, to take up the bloody banner he left behind. In the quiet moments after midnight, when the world is still and the powerful sleep peacefully in their luxurious beds, some say you can still hear the echo of a father's ultimate love ringing out across the centuries, defiant, unbroken, eternal.